Today on The State of Us, Biden or Trump in 2024? The parties may say no. What's best for America? Welcome to The State of Us. I'm your host, Justin T. Weller, joined today by the one and only, your friendly redneck liberal, the senior resident historian here at True Chat, the one and only Mr. Lance Jackson. Today, we've got a few different pieces, but ultimately what we're looking at is Trump and Biden, sort of the two obviously identifiable leaders of respective parties, and whether or not the parties, or rather the American people, really want either of these two to run again. There's questions, obviously, about whether or not President Biden might seek re-election, and there's questions about whether former President Donald Trump might seek to run again in what would surely be an interesting rematch. But ultimately, there's people in both parties, inside and outside, who are questioning if that might be the best thing for us. So before we dive into this, Lance, what is the word of the day?
Well, we need a big old conflagration. That's what we need.
Conflagration.
Yep. conflagration. 4 syllables. It's a noun. Conflagration means to burn, a big destructive fire. We just need to burn it all up and start over again.
Okay, a conflagration. Conflagration.
I knew that one would give you trouble. I'm gonna.
You're trying for the win here.
I am playing for the win today.
Okay.
Of course, I'm in politics. I'm playing for the win. Doesn't matter if I do anything good. Doesn't matter if I help the people. Doesn't even matter if I do what the people want, as long as I win.
As long as you win.
That's the political mantra of the day.
It's all that you need, really.
Which is why we need a conflagration and just start all over again.
Conflagration. Yeah, we'll see. I don't know if I'll get that one or not. So let's. You want to start with Biden or Trump? What are you feeling?
Let's start with President Biden.
Okay. So, President Biden, should he be running in 2024? According to a piece in the New York Times, Democratic whispers of no are starting to rise. In interviews, dozens of frustrated Democratic officials, members of Congress, and voters have expressed doubts about the president's ability to rescue his reeling party and take the fight to the Republicans. Ultimately, many Democratic leaders are left struggling to explain away a series of calamities for the party that all seem beyond Mr. Biden's control. Now, the important thing to note is that obviously, especially in the past month or so, we've started to see some things like inflation heading maybe in the right direction, although the economy has technically entered a bear market there. And so there's some good things, some bad things. And the other thing that's really complicated about all this is the Democrats are pointing to some things that they've done right that are these are going well. But at the same time, they're fighting this issue of, the overturning of Roe v. Wade. It's a messy, not that politics are ever clean, but it's a very messy midterms because there's a lot of egg on the face of different people for different reasons. And I think not the least of which, right? I mean, there's also this question about age and who the successor might be. I mean, currently Biden's 79. He'd be 82 by the time he won the 2024 election and was inaugurated. So there's a deep concern there about political viability. And then the other thing is talking to David Axelrod, who was the chief strategist for Barack Obama's 2 winning presidential campaigns. He says that Biden doesn't get the credit he deserves for steering the country through the worst of the pandemic, passing historic legislation, pulling the NATO alliance together against Russian aggression, and restoring decency and decorum to the White House. And part of the reason he doesn't is performative. He looks his age and isn't as agile in front of a camera as he once was. And this has fed a narrative about competence that isn't rooted in reality. So really, I think what Axelrod's saying here, right, Lance, is that competence isn't actually the problem, but because he looks his age and behaves in a way that stereotypically is associated with his age, regardless of whether or not the competence is there, there's questions about that, and that's only going to continue to increase.
Well, I think David Axelrod's a smart man. I've read a couple of books about him and 5 or 6 different articles. And if you don't remember, he is the main strategist who ran Barack Obama's campaign, initial campaign for president. And he, I think, states it very clearly there that Biden is not getting the support from the Democrats for the things he's gotten done. And he's taking a lot of heat. I think people are forgetting they put all their marbles on Biden because they didn't want Trump. And they're not giving Biden enough credit that not only did he defeat Trump, but like they said, he's kept NATO together against Russia versus Ukraine and this and that and the other. Now, they also, though, are complaining, the Democrats, they being the they there, the Democrats are upset because they haven't gotten a lot of progressive bills passed. But they have to remember, okay, the House is the slimmest of margins, and the Senate's a tie if they all vote together and the vice president gets to break the tie. It's not like they gave him, a 58 to 42 margin in the Senate and a 60 to 100 vote margin in the House, so you didn't give him the same set of standards that the Republicans had when Mitch McConnell pushed through all this legislation and everything else. You gave them the narrowest of margins. And, as we'll talk about later in the show, not all Democrats are painted with the same brush. They don't necessarily all think the same things. The age thing is a question, right? But my quick response, and take it if you want here, is if not him, who? I mean, I'm not necessarily a huge Joe Biden fan. I agree that, Joe Biden in 1990 and the 2000s was a much better version of who he is now. But if not Joe Biden, get me excited about another Democrat.
Well, because few Democrats that were interviewed as part of this article expect that high-profile leaders with White House ambitions are going to just defer to Vice President Kamala Harris, who obviously has had a series of political hiccups of her own while she's been in office.
But Justin, if that's the case, then I definitely want Biden.
You mean if you have to choose between Harris or Biden, you definitely
I want Biden.
Well, no, I mean,
and the bottom line is there are some Republicans that I want.
Yeah,
but I don't want Trump.
Right. Well, the deal is that, there's obviously a host of other Democrats who have been mentioned as potential successors. The question is, do any of these, and this is kind of the theme, I think, for today's show, same thing when we talk about Trump and potential other options, do any of these signal new life or new direction or, the possibility of, I liked Lance in the one article, and like I said, we're going to talk more about that. The notion of politics right now is too much about addition and subtraction, too much about division and subtraction and not enough about multiplication and addition. And the question is, are we going to see a candidate that's more in the camp of addition and multiplication rather than subtraction and division? And so these other people that are mentioned, right? Amy Klobuchar, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, and Beto O'Rourke, who is a former congressman but's now running for Texas governor.
Well, I think you have to put in Gavin Newsom of California as the governor, the governor of California as a possible candidate. And I think what's interesting there, they're all coming from the Senate. Well, or, Buttigieg isn't, but, he's from
administration.
He's from the administration. And, and O'Rourke, the dude.
Lance's favorite guy is
the dude sounds decent sometimes when he talks, but he can't win. He can't be the dog catcher in the city of Dallas. He can't win an election. How does he? I do not understand how he gains support in millions of dollars, because the dude is an interesting talker. I think he's a great campaigner. He's out there and, he connects with the people, but not enough to win an election. I mean, he's known for losing elections. He's like, the boy orator of the Platte, William Jennings Bryan. He's the man of the people who can't win an election.
People love him, but they won't vote for him.
I think that tells you all need to know.
So he's maybe not a great option.
Well,
I mean, if you want to lose, the Republicans might like for him to be chosen.
Not in my mind.
The thing, though, is the question, Lance, is from that list.
That's what we need, a conflagration. Just set it all on fire, burn it all away, and let's start over again. Start fresh.
From that list, is there anybody that comes to mind as somebody who would likely be focused more on addition and multiplication than they would be on division and subtraction?
Out of the Democrats?
Yeah, out of the field that I just
mentioned. Because I've got some
mentioned.
Republicans I like too.
Right. Well, we're going to talk about them in a minute. But of the Democrats, what do we got?
Did they mention Chris Dodd?
No.
The senator from Connecticut?
No.
He's one I like.
Okay. But of this list.
Oh, okay. I like Senator Chris Dodd of Connecticut and Transportation Director Buttigieg. I mean, I think
Transportation Secretary.
Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Secretary.
Yeah, I think he's those would be my two from the list you gave me.
Okay, if you're confined to the list. Mm-hmm. Well, just one from the list.
Oh, just
the
one
other,
from
the other
one from the list,
on the list,
and the other one from my own list. Yes.
Okay. Fair enough. So let's talk about.
You can't contain me with a list.
No, that's.
See, I would just
that much is beyond.
I would start
beyond reproach.
I would start my conflagration with that list. Mm-hmm. You could print that list for me, and that's what I'd like the match to start the conflagration.
What does the party say about Trump? Well, if you ask the Maryland governor, he says that backing Trump again would be the definition of insanity. What does that mean? Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back. We won't win back the White House by nominating Donald Trump or a cheap impersonation of him, Larry Hogan, governor of Maryland, said. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. A party that lost the popular vote in 7 of the last 8 presidential elections and that couldn't even beat Joe Biden is desperately in need of course correction, he said. The truth is that the last election was not rigged and it wasn't stolen. We simply didn't offer the majority of voters what they were looking for.
I like Larry Hogan. I mean, he's a Republican. I like Larry Hogan.
Well, you got a Republican bashing Trump, so
now,
Lance is happy.
Before the Republican listeners in our audience beat me to the punch, the divisive former President Donald Trump calls Hogan a rhino, Republican in name only.
Sure. So whether you believe that or not, I mean,
right.
He bears Republican as his party.
And if you don't understand, he's only the second Republican governor in the history of the state of Maryland to ever win a second term. So, he's winning in a blue state, people. But he's a Republican and he's campaigning as a Republican and he's talking to Mitch McConnell and said, use me. What Senate races can I help in? What governorship can I go and help us, help us, the Republicans, win more state houses? So he's going to the Republic, whether he's a Republican or not. I mean, whatever, you want to believe former President Trump, but he's going to the leadership of the Republican Party and saying, how can I help get more Republicans elected? So I think he is a Republican, but if you're a Republican who can win in a blue state and you realize that Donald Trump would not be good for the country, you got me listening. And I liked Hogan during the pandemic. He did a nice job in Maryland of balancing, closing things down and then reopening so that people were safe. And yet people could do business and make money. And that's what I like about him is he is a pro-business Republican who is middle of the road on social issues.
Which to win the governorship in Maryland, you would have to be. I mean, that's just being
well,
practical,
let's talk about
right?
if you want to be a Republican and win the presidency. I mean,
Well, because to the point of 7 of the 8 popular votes have been lost. Right. 7 of the last 8 presidential popular votes for Republicans have been lost. Now, keeping
60 to 70% of Americans agree on abortion, gay marriage, gun control. Most of us out here in this land that I love agree on these social issues. It's the political parties that divide us, that don't get us any positive legislation on these issues that really aren't divisive, because more than 65 to 75% of us agree on what the answer is.
And not that a populist agenda on its own is necessarily a good thing, but we are a nation that's based around a majority rule in almost every respect except for the presidency. We've talked at length about the Electoral College, but I think that, I mean, when you think about it, it's like, well, duh, yeah, that's true. But just to recap for people, think about 7, right, of the last 8 popular votes have been lost by Republicans. What does that say about the candidates you're offering, the platform you're offering? It's concerning, right? I mean, because if you're in the Republican Party, I would think there's a strategy discussion there about, we're not offering something that the majority of Americans feel like they want to support. So what we're doing, their current approach, right, is the approach is instead of saying, well, how do we get an agenda that more people will like? Our answer is to figure out how to get less people to be available to vote on the agenda.
We're not going to change our agenda. We're just going to make it harder for people to vote, or to people not to
the
want
people
to vote.
that are not likely to vote for us. It needs to be harder for them to vote or for their votes to count. And I guess the point there is, it seems like such a fundamental. The first thing that you would try to do is not keep people from voting or decrease the number of people voting. It would be, how do we change what we're advocating for to better speak to what Americans want? Because there's definitely the thing, right, that Lance and I have said again and again. What Trump showed is he tapped into an angry, upset, frustrated group of Americans who are looking for answers. The problem is, and Lance and I have contended this, what they're feeling, there's nothing invalid, right, about what they're feeling. We've done a couple shows recently on, that with anxiety and teenagers, and just the notion of your feelings aren't not valuable, right? They have value. You're being fed something that isn't in your interest, because people are taking advantage of you, of being upset, right? And being frustrated, which you have in many cases valid reasons to be, right? I think a lot of middle America feels like it's been left behind, or that our concerns are not being addressed. And there is some truth to the woes of rural America. I mean, as two people that live in rural America, I think we can tell you that. But there's that side of that doesn't mean that what the Republicans are attempting to sell is actually something that's going to help you. It just means that they see an easy target to try to take advantage of. And so it'd be great to see a platform, as Larry Hogan indicates, that is focused on what actually could get a majority of Americans' support. The last time, keep this in mind, Lance, the last time that a Republican won the popular vote was George Bush's second term. That's the last time a Republican, all the way back to Bill Clinton's first term, won the popular vote.
2004, right?
Right. So it's been in what, 30 years, Republicans have only ever once won the popular vote. And in fairness, we're at war in the aftermath of a serious national disaster, and right or wrong, the country feels like we need to stick with the direction that we're going. I mean, some of us may even question now whether or not that was a wise decision, but the point is that it's not like it was a platform that people were behind. We were united as a country behind we're going to stand together. We're going to move forward together. We're going to, so, and that's I'm not getting on Bush particularly. I'm just saying it's not like there was a platform at that time that was like, oh yeah, this is what we want.
It wasn't about social issues. It wasn't about, it was about fighting terrorism,
right?
Fighting
it was
the evil.
Defending ourselves,
defending
which we all could agree on.
From under attack, right?
But there's a point there too, though, right? What did Bush win the popular vote on? He won on something that everybody could agree. Everybody wanted to feel safe. Now we disagreed about how to do that, but that's what he won on, and not on social issues, tax reform, none of that.
Well, I think the neon sign for Republicans is the state of Kansas. It's a red state that earlier this summer had a vote on abortion because, the big abortion case, and Kansas wanted to just do away with abortion, and they put it on the ballot, and like 70% of people in Kansas voted against it.
Said no.
Even though Kansas is a red state. It's a dark red state.
It's a safe red.
Yeah.
Right?
And so that should be a neon sign to Republicans. Okay. Even the people who vote for Republican leadership went out and said, no, we're not going to totally do away with abortion. There's a middle ground there that we want to have. That's what's wrong with the Republican Party. And no, I'm usually not a strong supporter of the Republican Party. But if you're looking at, we just said, what's the matter with the Democratic Party? That's what's the matter with the Republican Party, is they're letting, just like the Democrats are letting the progressives, being the tail that wags the dog, the Republicans are letting the Jim Jordans and the Josh Hollies of the world run the party. And that's not where most Americans are. Are there Americans who are that conservative who want to go back, 100 years and live like we did 100 years ago? Yeah, there are. Okay. But it's not the majority of the Republican Party, and it's definitely not the majority of the American people. And that's where the Republicans are missing the boat. If you're just going to have this ultra-conservative moral majority idea and platform, you're not going to get most people to vote for you, because even your Republicans don't feel that way. Kansas is the neon flashing sign on the issue of abortion to get your attention if you're the Republican Party and trying to find a nominee that can defeat whoever the Democrats put up in 2024.
Well, and it's not the only one. There's some other examples we're going to talk about in a minute, Lance, from other states, red and blue, that demonstrate where Americans are at. And I guess what I'd love to see a poll on, somebody, please go conduct this. I'd like to see an open-ended question where you ask voters, right, in the United States about the Republican and Democratic parties. And this question, Lance, is focused on this. What do the parties stand for? What do the parties stand for?
And that's not rhetorical, because your answer would be, and my answer in agreement with you would be, well, they stand for, we have to win.
Right.
That's it. That's what their platforms are. We have to win. Okay, but what do you believe in? What do you want to do if you win? Oh, we don't know. We just want to win. But we want to do whatever it takes to win. And you and I have said for 2 years that that's what's the problem. That's why we need the conflagration to start all over again, because you have two political parties who dominate the politics of this country who are only interested in winning. They're not interested in making the country better. Now, if you do the poll out there, you got my answer. That's my answer, is they don't believe in anything except figuring out a way to win. All they want is the power of being in charge. They really don't want to do anything. They don't want to listen to the people. And folks, that's what we're all about, right? That's why we need this big fire to start all over. We need to wipe out the Democrats and the Republicans and say, we need a people's party. We need something out there where somebody's going to sit down and look at all of this material that's out there that says, wow, 74% of people agree on this part of gun control. 72% of Americans agree on this level of abortion rights. I mean, It's not hard. The work has been done. We've talked about it on this show for years. All we have to do is get rid of the Democrats and the Republicans and elect somebody who's going to follow the feelings of the majority, a vast majority. We're not talking 52-48. We're talking in the 70% range on these issues.
We've done a lot of shows on those, but let's talk about what a certain individual who ran for governor of Massachusetts learned. An opinion piece from Massachusetts, not from Massachusetts. An opinion piece from the person who ran for governor of Massachusetts, an opinion piece from the Wall Street Journal. We're going to take a look at some of those other states that ought to be flashing signs to Republicans and Democrats that they've lost touch with the American people. Keep it here on The State of Us. We'll be right back. Biden or Trump in 2024? I'd say no to both, if I could, please, and not, just to be clear, not because there aren't policies with either of those candidates that I would agree on. I disagree with the, very vague platform that might exist for either of them and the style. They're both in different ways members of old, right? Old style thinking, tradition, politics, old guard, right? Yes, they've tried to, change things up, and Trump obviously brought some interesting flavor to the Republican Party. But at the end of the day, they both been around longer than I've been alive by double. So that's not inherently bad. It's not like there's old people out there who can't offer something. But at the same time, I don't see that the parties have sought to redefine themselves. They just keep adding these little pieces over time and slowly taking pieces away. And what we left off at the end of the last segment is if we asked Americans, what do the parties stand for? Lance, I'm trying to think, but I don't know if you would come up with much of a consensus. If you polled Democrats and Republicans and said, what does the party stand for? I don't know if you'd get a very concise answer in either one. Would you get any real common themes out of either party? Maybe one or two that kind of come to mind, but I'm not sure that it would be what they stand for as much as just a thing that we're fighting for, like this thing. But it's not an idea. It's not a principle. It's not a notion. It's just this thing, that we're out there to either attack or defend. And that's not really, I guess that's not really what I'd like to see. And then I think that
that's not leadership.
No.
And what we're talking about here is political leaders. We want leaders.
The next question then is, what do Americans want the parties to stand for, or what do they think the parties should stand for, Republicans and Democrats? And this is where we turn to our last article. We often hear that America is a deeply polarized society divided by party, region, and lifestyle. We, the people, pundits tell us, are hopeless, too busy pulling down the other side to clean up the wreckage. But what if the people aren't really the problem? What if most everyday Americans share a moral compass, even if they sometimes approach issues from different directions? What if the real problem is that our political institutions stop us from coming together? In 2018, 65% of Floridians passed a ballot proposition to restore voting rights to people who had completed their felony sentences. In a state that trends red on social issues, 65% of them said that people who served their sentence ought to be restored their voting rights. And in 2020, more than 75% of Massachusetts voters favored the Right to Repair initiative, which gives small auto shops a legal right to access car data, allowing them to remain competitive with auto manufacturers. So in a state that is traditionally pretty darn blue, people said, these small businesses, they ought to have a chance to compete with the big guys. And it's not right for the car companies to simply withhold the data so that they can't compete because they can't diagnose a car. That seems wrong. In a blue state. In a very blue state.
Right.
And in that same year, 73% of Mississippians voted in a new state flag to replace the old emblems of the Confederacy with new forward-facing symbols.
73%. 3 out of every 4 people in Mississippi said, we have to change our flag.
And it's pretty much as red gets.
Yes.
And they said, yeah, we're not for this.
Right.
We don't want that. We're okay with understanding history, respecting our heritage. We're not okay with promoting symbolism that is harmful to people and upholds ideals that we don't hold.
And that was the citizens of that state. It wasn't people coming in from
not
the outside.
Not politicians, not party leaders, quote unquote leaders. These were the people of Mississippi, the people of Massachusetts, the people of Florida, the people of Kansas, right? They said, this is what we want.
But herein lies the problem, right? We know that the majority of us agree on a lot of things, right? But for this person who was running for the governor of Massachusetts, I was good enough to outrace 2 of the 3 longstanding politicians in the race. And I would have liked to have had the chance to bring my message directly to the primary voters. But the law of politics was that our campaign must, in such conditions, fail because they have a caucus type system, not like the Iowa caucus, but a different kind of caucus. And the problem is they didn't make the primary ballot, even though they outraised people who made it on the ballot. Now, that's my point, and Justin's point, I think, about what's wrong with the political parties and why we have to have this big, huge conflagration and just get rid of it, is you have somebody who went out there and said, you know what, I'm all about this, and this is what I believe in, and this is what I stand for. But they couldn't play the political party game to get themselves on the ballot because the political parties control the system that you must play to get on the ballot in the first place. Even though, as the author of this article points out, the majority of people in Massachusetts do not belong to a political party. And most people in Massachusetts do not align themselves with a political party.
But the political party's got to determine who the majority votes on.
The political party gets to dictate who everybody in Massachusetts play for. And that's not just the Republicans, but the Democrats. This happened to be a Democrat, but the Republicans in Massachusetts dictate who the Republicans. They get to choose how the Republicans choose who gets to go on the ballot. That's what we're trying to folks, you maybe don't remember your high school civics class or your high school government class, all right? But this is the problem. The Democrats and Republicans in each state control the process by which someone can get their name on the ballot. And so someone who is speaking to the majority of the people who their message resonates, but they can't get their name on the ballot because of the control of the Democrats or Republicans in the process on how to do it. Something's wrong with that, people. Something's wrong. That, that's like, oh, we really want George Washington to be president, but, he didn't get the right amount of signatures on the petitions to get his name on the ballot. And so, yeah, George, you're really popular and everything, and you're the father of our country, and you kept our country together, and you won all these battles against the big bad British, and we really like you, but yeah, you didn't do what the Democrats and the Republicans said you had to do to get your name on the ballot. So, you can't run for president. Are you kidding me? Right? But folks, seriously, that's what's going on here. Okay.
Right. It's not an exaggeration. That is literally because at least in Massachusetts,
the only reason George didn't have to get on because political parties didn't exist, right? That's the only reason George got on the ballot, because otherwise he probably couldn't have met the demands to get on the ballot for the Democrats or Republicans.
Yep.
Or at that time, the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists.
Right. Yeah. The evolution of parties. But at least in Massachusetts, they have an open primary. But for example, in the state of Ohio, we don't, which means that we force voters, right? If you want to participate in the selection of people for the general election, one way that our partisan politics in the state of Ohio work is they force you to only be able to view a slate of candidates for one party. So you don't even get any input on who the other options are going to be
Right.
on election day. And you say, well, that doesn't matter because I just vote for this party. Right. But there's a lot of Americans who don't do that. There's a lot of Americans who want to consider all the options, and you're not given that opportunity in states that have closed primaries. And why are you not given that option? What is the valid argument that advances democracy for having a closed primary? And I'm not saying it's rhetorical, but somebody please send us an email, podcast@thestateofus.org, because I don't know what it is, Lance.
Right.
I don't know what argument there is.
If we're defending democracy,
what good is a closed primary? How does that help democracy by forcing people to only align with a single party and not have input on another party? I mean, really, somebody tell me, because maybe there is an argument out there that I'm not aware of, but I don't know what it is. Because ever since I've really understood how the primaries work, not just in our state, but in other states, they seem like total partisan maneuvering to weed out a field of moderate candidates and force upon voters choices between extremes rather than encouraging consensus votes and consensus voters.
I want to go back to what I said to answer your question. What do the political parties stand for? They want to win.
Right.
And so they control.
And so how do you do that?
They control the process.
Right. Yeah. You control the process and you make it so that people who don't want to be on your team or the other team can't play the game to win. You rewrite the rules of the game to keep those people from having a chance at winning the game, even if they're running, like this person in Massachusetts, on what a super majority of people in Massachusetts want. But no, we're not going to let we're not going to let 2/3 of the people of Massachusetts who all want the same thing. We're not even going to give them the opportunity to vote this person into office because the party says we're not going to do it that way. That's not democracy, folks.
That's the problem.
That's not democracy. So anyway, let us know your thoughts. Please send us an email. Should it just be a conflagration and just light it all up, right? And start over? Or is it possible? And that's the thing that's sad, right? It is possible. It's possible for the parties to redefine themselves. They've done it, how many times? They certainly could do it again, but somebody has to stand up and say, we got to do this. Enough's enough, So why do we have this conversation today, Lance?
Well, we had to do a show.
Okay. But, well, that's one reason.
But no, the real reason we do this is because we
therapy.
Yeah, it is. It is good for us. That too. But okay. we work here at True Chat, and True Chat has a mission. And the mission here at True Chat is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And we got a little loud today, but we were respectful and we were being totally honest with you. And hopefully you enjoyed that, and it gets some discussion going in your circle of friends and family. And when they say, well, this sounds kind of interesting, I might like to listen to this, tell them as a podcast, they can find us on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us releases new episodes Tuesdays and Thursday mornings as a podcast. Those same episodes are heard on the weekends across North America, and you can hear them on AM and FM radio stations. Lance takes the win today with the big confounding word. And so we'll give it to him handedly on the win there. For The State of Us, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to producer Bradley Butch. Thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.